sharing an arena with the Seattle Storm, which is awesome. She was a student athlete at Emory University, where she earned a BA in sociology and pursued her interest in analytics at Georgia Tech, where she earned a second bachelor's degree in industrial and systems engineering. Prior to moving to Seattle, she spent 4 years consulting at Accenture, implementing statewide government projects. She later earned her MBA from Yale School of Management and reconnected with the sports world. She's led business strategy and corporate development in both entertainment and professional sports leagues, including the LPGA and Topgolf. And she currently serves as an advisor at WiST, and we're very lucky to have her here today. And then we have Meghan Chayka, who is an entrepreneur and the co-founder and CEO of Stathletes, a hockey data and analytics company, providing insights to over 22 leagues worldwide. She was featured on the insert cover of the Hockey News Top 100 of Power and Influence, listed at number 95 overall, top 10 for hockey business executives, and awarded Top Young Entrepreneur of the Year for 2018 to 2019 by the Ontario Chamber of Commerce. Meghan continues to inspire the hockey analytics community, even during a pandemic, through co-hosting Hockey Analytics Night in Canada. HANIC, is that correct? Acronym?
Something like that.
A weekly online conference focused on bringing the analytics community together to share, grow, and discuss the sport via diverse topics and speakers. And there will be an event tomorrow night, and we will share it with the group afterwards in a post-webinar update email in case any of our attendants are interested in going, and I'll definitely be there, so I'm very excited.
Great, thanks for that, Sydney. Meghan and Kendall, super excited for today's discussion. So we'll start it off just kind of going through the day-to-day and then transition into the questions that were submitted. So my first question for you is, what does a typical day look like in your job? We'll start off with Kendall.
Sure. So a typical day for me, I manage about 8 to 10 current projects that focus on building operational or financial models that help our leadership team make various strategic decisions. So I work closely with all the different departments, whether it's with ticketing and sales to set ticket prices, to working with marketing on fan surveys and analyzing the survey results, as well as on the arena side, if there are any sort of construction decisions or transportation challenges or things that we're trying to better understand. I manage kind of all the different projects and the analytics behind those projects.
Yeah, I guess for me, I mean, that's the nice thing about being an entrepreneur is you don't really have a typical day. So I'd say, during the COVID period, it's a bit more focused on the engineering side, software, projects, client outreach, that like customer success, I guess, portion of businesses. When we're in operations and there's hockey, it's just about, making sure that everyone's meeting their deadlines, that people are being, proactive and managing different teams and, the variety of their goals. So a lot about like goal setting and, not micromanaging, but I think overseeing like the big goals that you want to hit for the year, for the season, for different client types. So I'd say that's a great thing about sports is that, there's a wide variety of problems, issues, potential things to do, and every day can be different.
Awesome. Yeah. And I guess in terms of like the analytics itself during the break, you've probably had the opportunity to sort of pitch a deeper dive on analytics to a lot of teams and players, just given that I would say, everyone's always busy for the next thing. It's the season, and then they're busy for the playoffs, and then they're busy for the draft. And then, so now having this time, probably one of the first times ever where they have a few months where they almost don't know what to do. Can you speak a little bit to how sort of, without maybe the ability to have on, practices in person, data-driven, let's say, learning and practices and Stathletes' role during the pandemic and preparing teams?
For sure, and I think that's the interesting thing about hockey that people forget a lot is that it's a really international sport. I mean, we have, major leagues in Europe, in Russia, in China even, the KHL has a big team there. So our footprint is worldwide, and seeing so many of these leagues just grind to a halt where there's absolutely nothing that people can work on. They've had to direct their time and energy into like, are we doing the right thing for the future? Rethinking about processes. What type of software are we building? What type of automation are we doing in terms of understanding data better? And really having the time and staff for a lot of people to relook and really have a, really high level discussions on what they want the next 5 years, 10 years to look like as sports organizations. So I think without any live games, it's the only way you can do scouting now and drafting and think about that is going from, a data-driven perspective. So it's a really interesting, time period in history for sports, and I think it will change how these organizations come out of it.
Yeah, definitely a shift in thinking, and I feel like it's more long-term now. Awesome. And Kendall, so yesterday it was announced that Amazon acquired the naming rights for Seattle's arena and will be renamed Climate Pledge Arena. One of the features that we read about is that the ice will be made of recaptured rainwater. Can you tell a little bit more about this project?
Yeah, absolutely. This was a chance for us to be bold and different and continue on that path. And, from the start, we've been set out to create this incredible arena that is really by saving this historic roof. So it was originally built for the World's Fair, and we've decided to keep the roof and build this subterranean arena. So actually when you walk in, you'll be walking in on the upper concourse, and then everything kind of looks down from there. And so that'll be, just a really unique aspect of it. A couple of things that that really spoke to me. The first one is the ban of single-use plastics. This has been a movement nationwide. Starbucks made major changes in how they do, cups and straws as well. And I'm excited that we're going to continue on that path to really be zero waste. So we'll actually have no trash cans, which I think will be very different for fans. There'll be a compost bin and a recycle bin, but no trash cans. As I mentioned, we saved the roof, which was a big decision and really a huge engineering feat for the construction team. And then, as you mentioned, the rainwater. Seattle is known for its rain, but the fact that we're going to turn perhaps our cloudy days into something good for the environment, I think is really impactful. And so we'll collect the rainwater and use that on the ice. And then the last piece is, on the use of electric, right? Electric Zambonis, electric dryers for player jerseys. These are things that are, if you went to most teams in the league are very traditionally gas. And so our decision to make them electric is very much going against the grain, but an important decision for us in the goals that we're trying to achieve, not just our on-ice goals, but also how we impact our community.
I think Lydia is muted, but I will go on to the next question. And yeah, I know that at least in Toronto, like my cousins who live there, you have to compost and put your garbage in a clear, your compost has to be clear so that they know. Whereas here, we don't do that enough, and we should be. It's such an easy thing to do. And, let's all do our part. And we've seen great progress without us traveling, but as soon as things go back to normal, we see the harm it has on the environment. So it's great that when there are new projects in 2020, let's do them the right way instead of putting it off for X more years or whatnot. I'm gonna shift gears a little bit to diversity in the NHL, because we're really lucky to have 2 women here who are trailblazers in the league. And we know that the lack of diversity within the league is no secret. It's traditionally been mostly men and white men. And I think, Kendall, you have a really interesting perspective because you're you've been around the hockey and around the NHL for a while, but you're new to NHL, or fairly new into the hockey world for in your profession, and you're with a new team who's trying to do things right in terms of both diversity and hiring, and then you see just all around, like, you guys are saying, if we're a new franchise, let's establish the best practices based on today and not just conform to the norms. So I guess, what are your thoughts in hockey, both on and off the ice, on diversity?
Sure. So, yeah. So, on the ice, there's a lot of work being done both by the players and the league. So a few players launched the Hockey Diversity Alliance with the mission of changing kind of hockey culture. So you'll read a lot of stories, of players that kind of stopped playing the game, perhaps because of the comments that were made in the locker room or things that were said to them on the ice. And this goes for a range of folks who identify differently than the majority. So not just racial diversity. And then Kim Davis with the NHL is launching multiple task force to address things as it relates to coaching and referees and player development. And it was great, to hear a lot of her work is being done, particularly in getting more women involved in those spaces. You'll see kind of in the NBA, right? You see a lot more female referees in the NBA, and it's kind of like, well, why not in the NHL, right? Why haven't there been more female referees? Why are there, we have professional women's hockey, and, what does that look like for the path of like coaches, right? Like, how do we develop those coaches and then have them not just coach in the women's league, but how do they also become coaches in the NHL? So I think on the ice, there's a lot of work being done there. Off the ice, there's definitely still progress to be made. I think it's going to be, the efforts of, groups like Women in Sports Tech and folks who are in the business, like myself and Meghan, really being a champion and encouraging people to come to hockey, right? I talk to a lot of women and, they say, well, I don't know anything about hockey, so I don't really know if I want to work there. And I say, well, why not come and learn, right? This is a really incredible sport, and knowing hockey from day one is often not a requirement. We love to share the game with new people and expose new people to the game. And so I would say, for those who are interested and know nothing about hockey, I encourage everyone to apply and give it a chance, because we would definitely welcome you with open arms.
And I think that Kendall is awesome and very modest, from an awesome family of people doing really awesome things. And I would encourage everyone, now I'm going to give The Athletic a little shout out, I guess. If you haven't read about Kendall's family in general, like your father has done so much for the league. He was the first Black doctor, and he's at the Minnesota Wild and for the USA men's national team as well, right? So I just think you have a really interesting perspective of seeing what your father does, but then also just creating your own path and just really paving the way for other women in the league. So we thank you for all your hard work. And I will let Lydia now ask Meghan.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's just so inspiring to hear your story, and just with Women in Sports Tech, we're just so fortunate to be connected with awesome people, just opening our eyes. So thank you for that. Meghan, question for you. So pitching the value of advanced data is often a difficult task in itself, especially if you're dealing with old school, traditional league office folks. But I can imagine that it might be difficult as a woman trying to pitch the value. Can you speak to some of the challenges that you've had to overcome?
I think it goes back to what Kendall was talking about maybe not coming from a hockey background or knowing that side. I think analytics, tech, business, there's a lot of space for people that haven't grown up in the sport or weren't NHL players. And I think you can have a unique skill set and do incredible things on that side of the business. So I would never eliminate working for a sports franchise just because you don't have that pedigree that you think makes you unique. There's a lot of new areas of the business that are incredibly important and that, you know, sports really can improve on. So if you're an engineer, if you're a software developer, you know, be engaged, apply for those jobs. Even if you don't think you have every point on your CV that, you know, lines up, you know, men are applying. So put your name in the ring and connect with people. And I think maybe Kendall can speak to this as well, but like sometimes in underrepresented areas, women like being the only woman in the room. And I keep saying to, you know, others, it's like, we need not just to be one person in the room. We need to have, you know, more gender parity. We need to be different so that when you walk in, you're not the only person that, you know, it looks the same or has a similar background. You know, you want to have people from different walks of life. People, I mean, all of our fans now are incredibly diverse. So there's no reason to not have that representation in the boardroom. And I think getting comfortable with building a network of strong, powerful, smart women, I think that only helps us. You know, it doesn't hurt us. We're not all fighting for one job anymore.
I think that's great for this audience to hear, because I think a lot of our questions were all about what they, you know, if they're a little bit nervous about applying because they might not have all that experience, but it's definitely important to you know, look for different roles.
And also I think, like, especially with myself, I applied to an engineering job, and when I applied, I thought, like, I'm not confident. I'm not ready for this role. I don't have enough software engineering experience. I worked in consulting the summer before I graduated, and I just thought, like, I'm not qualified. And I was really lucky to have an amazing boss who was like, you know way more than you think you know. And most people might not have that when applying. So just sort of know that, like, if my brother were in my position, he would probably just apply and be like, yeah, I got this.
Absolutely.
Yeah, my dad was the one who pushed me to apply for the job at Catapult, and now here I am. But yeah, it's funny how that works. But and a follow-up question to that is, Meghan, how do you respond when people float your name for NHL general manager?
I mean, I think in any sport, and when we're talking about like officiating and coaches, you know, not having enough women, I think too at the highest levels, because to be able to identify talent that looks different than the traditional white men, I think it's very important to have more women in powers to hire people. So, you know, anytime that I or any other women gets a shutout in that, you know, that framework, I think we should all be like an echo chamber to be like, yes, hire more women, hire different people in those jobs that then can identify talent that, you know, is diverse. So I think that's how we'll really change things, is when, you know, women and people of, you know, different backgrounds get those types of roles and can build out departments that reflect the broader society, not just sort of, you know, what hockey has traditionally been.
Definitely. And every time I, you know, see on Twitter someone mention your name, I get really excited. First of all, we need more GMs who understand analytics and tech, and then let's have a woman in front of, and women in general in front office positions. So that's awesome. So now we're gonna pivot to a quick speed round. We've been trying to make these speed rounds actually speed rounds, but we'll see how well we do today. So I guess for Meghan, because it looks like you're unmuted, you can go first. Do you have any book recommendations for our audience?
I'm reading Thinking in Bets right now, and I would suggest it. It's quite interesting. I think it's Annie Duke, or I think that's the author.
Awesome. And
Yeah, I would say, you know, this is an analytics focus, but The Power of Moment by Chip and Dan Heath. It's just a really good business book that kind of really changes the game and talks a lot about, you know, creating special moments for people and fans within your business. And then the last one is Subscribed, which I just finished by Tien Zhu, which is about the subscription economy, which is like what everything is these days. Movies, Peloton, all of that. And it's kind of like, you know, your business will become subscription based, whether you like it or not, as people start to expect being able to pay for things on a monthly basis.
Definitely. I'm going to take a look at both of those books because those sound great. Who's your favorite NHL team and player? And I said, it's okay if it's the Leafs, but not John Tavares because, you know, he left us, the Islanders, and still salty.
I saw that question, and obviously for me, I like everyone equally, but I would say for anyone on the call, if you ever have a chance to go see European hockey, it's awesome. Like in Germany, the top 3 pick in the draft is going to come from a German team in Mannheim, and their arena is actually called the SAP Center, and it is just like incredible, like 5-course meal, supporter section, you feel like you're at a soccer game. So if you ever find yourself in Germany, go to a hockey game.
I would definitely echo that for Megan. We went to a hockey game in Switzerland in Davos, and it was incredible. When you think about, like, you know, football playoffs here in the States, it's like that for every hockey game in Europe, and it's really incredible. My favorite player is Evander Kane, and my favorite team for at least the next 18 months is the Minnesota Wild, and then it will become whatever our team name is here in Seattle.
And we're very excited to hear that team name sometimes. And for both of you, I'm not sure, Kendall, if you're active on Twitter, but who's your favorite Twitter follow? I know it will be hard to pick one, but.
Yeah, that's really hard for me because I feel like there's so many good people in sports analytics. So I would say whatever sport you're in, try to find follows in other sports, because I think I've learned so much from like soccer to the NFL to the MLB. So for sure, you know, go outside your comfort zone, see what other sports are talking about, and follow those people.
Yeah, and I'm big on Instagram. You know, I will give a shout out to a couple female hockey players. First one is Blake Bolden, and the second one is Sarah Nurse. So if you follow them on Instagram, they're doing great work and really incredible people.
Definitely. And yeah, one of my like favorite things to do at least is read like papers from like conferences or whatever from other sports and analytics, because most likely if it's from your sport, you've kind of dove deep into that, but just seeing like, okay, how can some things that maybe we don't think apply to our sport apply in terms of analytics? So that sounds awesome.
Great. So next we'll transition to the questions that we had submitted. So our first one is, can you share one way that you've been able to learn the tech speak / backend that allows you to speak confidently about it?
I guess just exposure to it. I mean, I always tell, so I have a position 2 data scientist in residence at a university, and I always tell students, like, take more than you think that you want to, in terms of like, if it's a hard class and it's not really in your faculty, just audit it. You know, don't be afraid to sort of step out of your comfort zone, take more applied math, stats, programming. You know, you never know where the industry is going to go. So the more exposure you have to any of the various, you know, skill sets that come into the technical side, I think you're just that much more prepared for wherever the industry pivots. So definitely take more than just in your faculty in your specific area of interest.
Yeah, and then on my side, I would say from a business standpoint, you know, take business classes, understand what a P&L is, understand those kind of financial metrics. And if you're not in school, volunteer to spend time with the finance department. You know, sit down with the accountant, sit down with the controller, and whether it's just have coffee and have them kind of explain some things to you, you know, over the course of time, just so you can understand and hear the language. You know, I think that's often what kind of gets people tripped up, is there's a lot of new words that are used. And so the more you hear them and look them up, look up on Google, things like that, that will help you get familiar with the lingo, and then that will allow you to speak in those terms as you go forward in your career.
Yeah, that's great advice. And then I have a question for Megan. So what type of information do you look at when assessing players? And how do you make the decisions based on data and determine what is meaningful? So I guess, you know, finding where to use data, and then also kind of like strategy of maybe I see this with my eyes and pair.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think you see this in the NBA too, and we'll talk about this on the call tomorrow, is, you know, there's no like right way to do modeling. It's, you know, it's not black and white and everyone does this and everyone has the same decisions. I mean, a lot of working with data and analytics is like your assumptions and the data set. You know, is it 3 years? Is it 5 years? What are you training and testing your model on? It can change. And I think that's the most exciting thing, is that sports analytics is like a river, right? Like, you know, there's aging curves, there's all sorts of, you know, different information that goes into, you know, player development and roster construction. So I would say, you know, the better, more accurate data you have, the more likely you'll make better models and better decisions. But there's a lot of gray too. And I feel like that's kind of the problem, is people that are outside of like the technical space want just like answers. And I think the more you do modeling and the more you work in analytics, the more questions you have. And I think for some people that really bothers them, but I feel like for me, that's like the exciting thing, right? Is finding out new and interesting information about hockey players. And, you know, with it being so international too, not all leagues are the same. Not all teams are built the same. Not all teams win the same way. So we work with such a variety of clients, whether it's agents, players, trainers, just to, you know, reach their end goal and have more information. So I'm not sure if that was a straightforward answer, but unfortunately there isn't any straightforward answers. But that's, you know, why there's such big analytics, you know, departments now.
Yeah, and that's like crucial, being able to kind of just think on the fly instead of follow some textbook, because there isn't, you know, a textbook answer for any of these things. So
yeah, be adaptable. Great. So Kendall, your internship with the Ladies Professional Golf Association solidified your desire to work in sports on strategy initiatives and help propel your career in the space. What advice do you have for students who are currently interning remotely, or on how to make the most of their internship experience?
Yeah, so I, was blessed to have an opportunity to intern quite a few times throughout my career. And I think the first piece of advice I would say is meet with people who aren't perhaps in your department that you're interning in. I think a lot of us in sports have spent time in different departments, right? Whether it's partnerships or marketing, communications, you could be on the hockey ops side or basketball ops. There's so many different departments in which you can land, and they all do really fun and unique things. And they all have some sort of analytics component to them, right? You may not be creating the very technical models, but everyone is looking to understand the data behind what they do. And so I recommend just, meeting with the people, even if you're interning, let's say in partnerships, meet with the people who are in marketing, meet with the people who are in sales, so you can get a sense of what they do, and perhaps how does the analytics that you're running in partnerships during your internship, how could it be transferable to what's happening in the sales department? So things like that. And then my second piece of advice would be to do that type of connection. So even if you're assigned, one particular project, really think critically about how does the analytics that I'm doing apply to other areas in this business, or how can I be helpful in other areas of the business? So if you took a class on survey analytics, but you're currently interning in the ticket sales department, talk to the person in marketing who's in charge of the season ticket member survey and understand and learn about how they're doing analytics on their season ticket base, and see if you can, offer any insights that would be helpful to that department. So those would be my kind of two pieces of advice.
Yeah, I think that's awesome advice, because I think that like increasingly in organizations, people are realizing that every department needs analytics. HR needs analytics, and marketing needs analytics, and events needs it. And then obviously there will be the more engineering and data science sides. But one thing that we still see is like there are some departments that are just siloed. And if you talk to the people like hey, why is this survey designed like this? And then you can actually kind of draw more insights from the data and gain a better picture. So that's great advice, especially for anyone learning. I think like an interdisciplinary approach is very important, and that's what I've seen in my role as well. So now we have an audience submitted live question. From your perspective, how has the usage of analytics on the sports business side evolved over the years? What is something new that you're excited about in this space?
I can tackle that one. So how has it evolved? I think over the years, first it's transitioned away from Excel, and that automatically adds, a significant amount of capability to really gather insights. The second piece I think that's really exciting to come is this concept of a connected fan, in which we're using data warehouses or single source of data collection in order to gather information about each individual fan and their preferences, in order to then provide targeted marketing and targeted information back to that fan. So for example, I'm sure many of you are on team, lists for your favorite sports team, right? And they'll send you an email, and in that email, there may or may not be things that you're interested in. So, before in the past, you could just send one generic automatic email, and that was a big step. Now we're going to take that to the next level to say, okay, Sydney went to see, this rock concert last week, and we know that she always buys 2 pizzas during the second intermission. And so for this week in her email newsletter, we're going to give her a 10% discount on the pizzas, and we're also going to promote 2 concerts that we think she would be interested in because she went to the rock concert last week. And so that's going to be just a huge step on the business side, because we get to have that directed communication to fans. And ultimately, we know that will kind of pay off in turn as fans purchase more because they feel like they're being heard and we're providing them with the information and things that they would be interested in.
Thanks, Kendall. And our next question is, I know we have a lot of male allies here with us today. So based on your experience, can you share some of the things that you think they can do to support future Meghans and Kendalls?
Sure. Well, I think one was what I was alluding to before, and that's really like if a woman has an article that's out or is on a list, always like responding, engaging. There's a lot of trolls in those comment sections, and they're not exactly fun sometimes for women. So I'd say if you are an ally, just be very open and network with us like you would any white male. Obviously there's not very many of us, so sometimes that's a bit more challenging, or people think it is. But I think if you just use the same framework that you do day to day with your departments, and look for value too in what women are doing, whether it's in analytics, tech, engineering, I think that you can actually have a competitive advantage with how many women out there that are incredibly talented that can be added to your group. So hire us, network with us, and retweet and promote our articles.
And attend events like these, I say, because
absolutely.
If this is only women here talking about their stories, then we don't have male allies who are promoting, women in the workplace and understand the importance of those diverse perspectives. So
totally, and put your money where your mouth is. If you really believe in diversity, sponsor things that are, women-led or from, diversity inclusion initiatives.
Awesome. And then, Kendall, did you have anything to add, or you covered?
No, I think that was awesome. Yeah.
Awesome. So now I have a question for Meghan. Is there an aspect of the on ice game that you are excited to cover and you feel like hasn't been explored yet, aside from the sports science?
Yeah, I mean, just, it's kind of like I was saying about the NBA or MLB. There's all sorts of data sets and new ways to track data more efficiently, more accurately. every year it's getting cheaper in terms of, you know, different applications. So I think we'll just get a lot better understanding of areas of hockey that are not on the box score. So traditionally you see, you know, face-offs, hits, giveaways, takeaways, shots. That's all, you know, and there's not a lot even for understanding goalies. And I think you see that with, like, you know, the St. Louis Blues having a goalie that was in the AHL and, you know, wasn't going to do much the year before and then won the Stanley Cup. So I think getting those key pieces and understanding more about certain positions that maybe traditionally weren't, you know, there was no data on them or very little. I think that will transform how player development and scouting occurs.
Yeah, and I saw that, like, with Robin Leonard when he was on the Islanders. Very sad that we lost him to the Blackhawks. And is he on the Coyotes now? Or
no,
I
think
what's it called? Denver Avalanche, I think. But
yeah, but that's one of those positions that, you know, there's some people that pay really high salaries and other people that have, you know, them at league minimum, and you know, understanding more about that, about officials, just like learning from other sports too. We take a lot of inspiration from soccer, from basketball, as to what you guys are doing and making hockey better that way.
Shout out to my cousin who works at the league office and just said he's on Vegas. So now I'm really embarrassed. I messed up with 3 different Justin.
Awesome. All right, our next question. What would you suggest for someone who's interested in analytics but not sure where to start? What was the most valuable experience or internship for you to gain skills and explore more about this field?
That's a good question. I would say, you know, I think starting in ticketing, at least on the business side, you know, ticketing analytics, I would say, is probably the most in-depth at this point and most well used. Between that and maybe marketing when it comes to surveys. So being familiar with surveys and how to write good surveys, how to ask the right questions in order to drive the different insights that you're looking for, how to analyze survey data, you know, what does it mean to have a set that, you know, can be analyzed and you can actually draw information from, right? Like you can't just survey 10 people, right, and make assumptions on your 18,000 person arena. So understanding that aspect, and then I would say going back on the ticketing side, everything from ticket pricing, dynamic pricing, variable pricing, you know, all of those things are very much, you know, well ingrained, not just at the team areas, but in the league offices as well, and is also really starting to trickle down into some of the minor league teams too. So there's lots of opportunities, not just at the professional level, but to also be in analytics and provide insights, you know, at the minor league levels as well. And then I would definitely say, you know, on the operation side, you know, Meghan's work, that's definitely growing, and I'll let her speak to that.
So the question was, what was the best experience in terms of in analytics? I guess for me, it was not just thinking of working in sports. Like when I came out of university, I've always done sports, been interested in it, but I liked it as a hobby. Like I kind of liked being a fan, I won't lie. So I actually worked for a Fortune 500 company that was like $37 billion top line, you know, had a huge amount of insight into what they did in, you know, stats, analytics, projections, finance. So I think that experience really shaped and molded understanding like what was good in enterprise, what worked, but what also wasn't very nimble. And that combination, I don't think I'd be the same person without that experience. I worked there for about 3 years. So I'd say if people do want to work in sports, don't be afraid of getting different industry experience. Like it's not something that's, you know, gonna put you outside of the industry. I think if you're a superstar, anyone wants you on your team. So if you can, you know, exceed expectations at every role, you're never going to hit that wall where no one wants you. So just take whatever comes to you, but whatever you're passionate about, and really do a great job at whatever role you're in currently.
Definitely. And I'll just say we have a ton of amazing questions coming in. We are reaching our almost our deadline, I guess, or the panel's ending, but we will try and answer some of these in a post webinar follow-up email. And just for one last question, do you guys have sort of like tools, languages that you would recommend people who just want to get their feet wet and get started to start? I always say, like, there's a ton of publicly available data for different sports leagues if you're really interested in sports. So just, you know, do a passion project. It might not be, you know, the best project that the league office is going to use, but show that you're interested, and you'll learn while getting your, you know, feet wet. You're not going to learn if you just read about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's like a lot less barriers now than there was, you know, even 10 years ago, whether it's our Python. I actually just did a datathon on women's hockey with a graduate level group, and they were from all over the world. And did a lot of them, half of them had no background in hockey, and what they did with the women's data was exceptional. And I think that helps too when you go to apply for a job to have a sample. You know, it's one thing to say, hey, I'm really proficient in Python. It's another thing to actually show it. So I'd say for anyone here, especially if you are a woman, you know, do a blog post on Twitter, send to people in terms of like not just sending a CV, but also like a one-page report. Especially if it's something a bit unique and interesting, you know, take someone's model and add something to it. I think that's an incredibly valuable skill, and just shows that you know how to do the reps, you know how to engage with the community, and I think it'll help you, you know, jump ahead of the line.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And then, you know, the piece I would say on the business side is kind of echoing what Meghan mentioned about analyzing. It doesn't have to be sports data. So, you know, because a lot of my work is related to, you know, different aspects of operations, right? So whether it's looking at transportation patterns to and from the arena, whether, you know, if it's looking at sales metrics, right? You know, one of the things I've been over this time of COVID, it's just been so interesting is like Peloton, right? Like, why is everyone buying a Peloton right now, right? And so looking at, if you can think about some of the trends that you're seeing just in your everyday life and think critically about them, and think about the data, think about where can I get, you know, any sort of publicly available information, and run analysis on it to perhaps paint a picture of what's going on. Even if that doesn't get used, honing those skills is what's really important, because that's ultimately kind of how projects kind of land on my table, right? It's, I saw this, I have a couple of thoughts on it, but I'm not sure if they're true. Can you go and run the analytics or figure out if what's happening is what I actually think is happening, or if it's something different? And I think that having that skill is just incredibly important.
Definitely. And I think one of my favorite things to do is read papers about different industries, almost not so much the sports industry, and think, how could this apply? And not necessarily only papers, but articles, analysis, like you said, ticketing, Peloton, you know, that might be considered sports in a sense, but not really. There's a lot that we can learn from a direct to consumer perspective from them. So those are some of the things, and I've thought about that a lot, just like how they've brought their community together during COVID so well, and what can the sports industry learn from them? So that's actually something that I've been talking about a lot. And I said there's an NBA columnist at ESPN named Kevin Pelton, and I know that when his last name corrected to Peloton, I might be talking about it too much. So I'll leave it to Lydia to wrap up today.
Yeah, sure. No, thanks so much, Meghan and Kendall. And this really just speaks to our audience. I think it's definitely an uncertain time, so having this guidance and advice is definitely helpful. I was taking notes the whole time, but no, thank you so much. And we do have a few action items just for everyone who's on. So the first one would be to sign up for our newsletter if you haven't already. Be sure to follow us on LinkedIn, social media, Instagram, Twitter. And then make sure to spread the word too. If you have any friends that are in school or doing internships right now, get them on our webinars and have them join our community. And then be sure to attend Meghan's event tomorrow. We'll include all the details in our follow-up email. No, thanks again, everyone. Enjoy the weekend.
Just for the panelists, just to smile quickly so we can take a
Oh, okay.
picture, 'cause I feel like I never smile, and then last time my
Oh yeah, I'm always like mid speaking or something.
Yeah.
I think I got two, so hopefully
Awesome.
one will.
Okay.
Thank you for having us, and Kendall, so much wisdom. I really, really enjoyed today.
I did too. Thank you for having us. This was great.
Thank you so much.